You want to know what I remember most? It wasn't the screaming. It wasn't the fire eating through the hull, or the way the air went thin and cold when the pressure seals failed. No, what I remember most is how quiet the human was before it all started. He was just sitting there, cleaning his boots. Let me back up. My name doesn't matter much anymore. Most of my kind can't say it right anyway. I was a Velsurin. We come from the ring worlds near the old trade spine, and we were soldiers, real soldiers, trained for 200 cycles, tall and gray-skinned with those long jointed arms that everyone in the galaxy is afraid of. I say that with no pride now. Back then I had a lot of pride. Too much, honestly. I served under the conquered fleet, peacekeepers they called us. We kept the shipping lanes clean. We settled disputes. We showed up when a colony got greedy and we made them ungreedy. And in 300 years of conquered history, nobody had ever seen us lose. So when they told us we'd be escorting a supply convoy through the Kesari Drift, and that Earth was contributing one ship to the escort, most of us laughed. One human ship, old-looking thing, hull scarred like it had been dragged through an asteroid field on purpose. We called it the Junk Crate. The humans called it the Margaret Ostrowski, named after some old dead woman from their homeworld. Nobody knew who she was. Nobody cared. You have to understand what we thought of humans back then. They'd only been in the wider galaxy for maybe 40 years. Babies, new species. Their homeworld was a horror show. A planet with weather that could kill you, gravity that crushed your chest, oceans full of things with teeth, and a sun that would peel your skin off if you stood under it too long. The scientists who first surveyed Earth submitted a report that just said, in the formal galactic script, "Death world, unfit for civilized colonization." And yet humans came out of that place, walking around, talking, trading, smiling with all those flat white teeth. We thought they were lucky. We thought they were charming little survivors, the way you think a small animal is charming when it snaps at your finger. Cute, harmless. We were so wrong, We were so wrong it makes my hands shake even now to remember it. The Kesari Drift is a bad place to travel. It's a stretch of dead space where 3 old empires fought and died long before any of us were born, and their wreckage still floats there, huge broken hulls the size of moons, drifting slow, cold, silent. The gravity is strange. Signals bounce and get lost. And the pirates who live out there, the ones we were sent to protect the convoy from the Drago, they know every shadow in that dark. Our convoy was 11 ships, 6 cargo haulers full of medical supplies for a plague colony on the far rim, 4 conquered warships including mine, the Talon of Vel, and 1 human ship. I was the deck officer for boarding operations. My job was simple. If we got attacked, if anyone tried to board us, I led the team that pushed them back off. I was good at it. I'd done it 11 times. I had scars I was proud of. The first time I met a human up close was during the pre-transit inspection. We docked the human ship to run a systems check, standard procedure. We didn't trust the Junk Crate to keep up, and I walked over with 2 of my soldiers to look them over, to size them up. Maybe, if I'm honest, to make them feel small. There were 9 humans on that ship. 9. To crew a vessel that size, we would have used 40 Velsurin. 9 humans ran the whole thing. And they were small, soft-looking, round faces, short. The tallest of them came up to about my collarbone. They wore worn uniforms with patches sewn on by hand, and one of them, a young one, a female, had a little cloth animal hanging from her belt. A toy. A soldier carrying a toy. I nearly laughed out loud. Their captain came to greet me. Older human, gray hair, lines all over his face like cracks in dry riverbed. His name was Reyes, Captain Daniel Reyes. He had this slow, easy way of moving like nothing in the universe was in a hurry. He held out his hand. Humans do this. They grip each other's hands as a greeting, and I looked at it and I did not take it. I wanted him to know his place. He just smiled a little, pulled his hand back and said, "Suit yourself, big fella." Big fella to me, a Velserin boarding officer. I should have been insulted. Instead, I remember feeling almost confused because he wasn't afraid of me. Every species is afraid of my kind. It's the first thing they feel when they see us. But this small, soft old human just looked up at me with tired, kind eyes, and there was no fear in them at all. None. I told myself it was stupidity. He was too dumb to know he should be scared. I know better now. We ran 3 days into the drift before the Drago hit us. They came out of the wreckage. That's how they hunt. They hide inside the dead ships, powered down, cold as the void, and they wait. Our sensors couldn't tell them apart from the debris. By the time we knew they were there, they were already among us. I felt the first impact before the alarms even sounded, a deep boom that shook the whole deck. Then the lights went red, and the ship's voice was screaming about hull breaches and boarding pods, and everything happened very fast. There were dozens of them. Drago boarding pods punching into our hulls like teeth into soft fruit. They split the convoy apart. The cargo haulers scattered. 2 of our warships lost power in the first minute. The Drago had something new, some kind of pulse weapon, and it fried our systems from the inside. The Talon of Vel, my ship, took a bad hit early. We lost engines. We lost half our guns. And then the boarding began. I did my job. I gathered my team and we fought them in the corridors, deck by deck, room by room. And I'll tell you the truth, the Drago are terrifying. They're fast, they've got too many limbs, and they don't feel pain the way most things do. We held for a while. We killed a lot of them. But there were too many, and they kept coming. I remember the moment I understood we were going to lose. I was in the main junction on Deck 4, and I looked down the corridor, and it was full of them, an endless dark tide of them, and behind me my soldiers were falling one by one, and I thought, this is it. This is how a Velserin dies. Standing. Fighting. It's not a bad way to go. And then the comm crackled. It was the human ship. Talon of Vel, this is Margaret Ostrowski. Captain raised his voice, slow and calm like he was ordering a drink. We see you're in some trouble over there. Mind if we lend a hand? I actually laughed. Blood in my mouth, half my team dead, and this old human was asking permission to help. What was one junk crate with 9 soft little people going to do? Do what you want, human, I said. We are already dead. There was a pause. And then he said something I'll never forget as long as I live. He said, "Now, not today." I didn't see the first part of what happened. I only heard about it later, from the survivors and from the ship logs. But I've heard it told so many times now that I can see it in my mind like I was there. The Margaret Ostrowski was the only ship in the convoy still fully operational. The humans had ridden out the pulse weapon. Later we learned their systems were older, cruder, less connected, and the pulse just couldn't get a grip on them. Their ship was ugly and outdated, and that's exactly why it survived. So instead of running, which is what any sane commander would have done, what I would have done, what the whole rulebook of every civilized fleet in the galaxy says you should do, the humans turned their ship around and flew it into the middle of the Drago swarm. 9 people against a pirate horde. They rammed a Drago cruiser, on purpose, crippled it, and then they blew their boarding tube against our hull and they came aboard the Talon of Vel, into a ship they knew was overrun, a ship full of enemies, a ship the size of a city that was already lost. 7 of them came, 2 stayed to fly the ship. 7 humans walked into hell to pull out a species that hadn't even shaken their captain's hand. I met them again on Deck 4. I was still standing in that junction, still fighting, though fighting is a generous word for what I was doing by then. I was mostly just refusing to fall. My arm was broken. 2 of my soldiers were left. The Drago were pressing in. And then there was noise behind the Drago. Wet, terrible noise. I saw one of the pirates, one of those fast, fearless things, just stop. Its top half separated from its bottom half. and behind it stood a human. The young female one, the one with the toy on her belt. She had some kind of blade in her hands, a thing that hummed and glowed, and she was covered in Drago blood, and her face. I have to tell you about her face. She was not angry, she was not afraid. She was not screaming a war cry, her expression was calm, focused. Almost gentle, like she was doing careful work, like a surgeon, like a gardener trimming a hedge. And she was smiling, just a little, just at the corner of her mouth. That's the thing about humans that no report ever captured, that no scientist ever understood until it was too late. They enjoy it. Not cruelly, not madly, but there's something in them, something old, something that comes from that death world of theirs, some ancient part that has been fighting to survive against impossible odds for so many thousands of years that when the real fighting starts, when everything is on the line, they don't panic like the rest of us. They come alive. The Drago swarm turned to face the humans, and that was their mistake, because when a Drago turns, its back is open. And there were more humans in the corridor now, moving through the smoke, and they moved wrong. That's the only way I can describe it. Every other species moves in patterns, predictable, trainable. The humans moved like water, like they didn't have joints, like the rules of how a body should move didn't apply to them. One of them, a big male, bald, tattoos all up his arms, grabbed a Drago by two of its limbs and simply pulled. And the thing came apart. He did it with his hands. No weapon. Just hands and that horrifying human strength that comes from growing up under gravity that would flatten the rest of us. We think of ourselves as strong. My whole species is built around being strong, but we evolved on gentle worlds. The humans evolved on a world that was actively trying to kill them every single day, and it made them into something the galaxy had never designed a defense against. Captain Reyes found me in the middle of it. He walked calm, through a corridor full of dying pirates, and he looked at my broken arm and my dead soldiers, and he said, "You still with us, big fella?" I couldn't speak, I just stared at him. He took a device off his belt and slapped it onto my broken arm, and it hissed and clamped and the pain went dull. Human field medicine, crude and effective, like everything they did. "Come on," he said, "we're getting your people off this ship." "Why?" I managed to say. It wasn't even really a question, it was disbelief. "Why are you doing this? We are not your people." I did not even take your hand. And Reyes, this old, tired, soft little human who I had looked down on 3 days ago, he looked at me with those kind eyes and he said, "Doesn't matter whose hand it is, son. Somebody's drowning, you pull him out. That's the whole rule. That's the only rule that ever mattered." And then he shot a Drago that was coming up behind me, without even turning his head, all the way around. I don't have words in my language for what the humans did on the Talon of Vel that day. We don't have the concepts. My people are brave, but our bravery is measured, careful. We calculate the odds and we accept an honorable death when the odds are lost. Humans don't calculate, or no, that's not right either. They calculate and then they decide the odds don't get a vote. There's a difference. The odds were that they should all have died. 9 humans against a Drago raiding force does not end with the humans winning. It can't. The math is the math. But they didn't seem to know that. Or they knew and they just refused. Refused with their whole bodies. Refused so hard that reality bent around them. They cleared Deck 4. Then Deck 3. They moved through my dying ship like a storm, and the Drago, who fear nothing, who don't even understand fear, the Drago started to run. I saw it with my own eyes. I saw pirates who would have gladly died to kill me turn and flee from 7 small soft humans, because some old animal instinct in them had finally recognized what they were looking at. A predator, a real one, the kind their nightmares are made of. We got 240 of my people off the Talon of Vel. The humans carried the wounded on their backs. That young female, her name was Corporal Amara Akafer. I learned her name later. I made sure to learn all their names. She carried a Velsaran soldier twice her size across 3 decks with a Drago blade wound in her side, and she never once put him down. When we got to the human ship, when the last of us tumbled through the boarding tube into that ugly, beautiful junk crate, I turned around to look for Reyes. He wasn't there. Here is the part I have never been able to tell without stopping. 2 of the humans didn't make it back. The big bald one with the tattoos, his name was Petty Officer Marcus Bell. He stayed behind at a bulkhead junction to hold it while the rest of us evacuated. He knew he wasn't coming back. He held the line so the Drago couldn't flank us. The last anyone saw of him, he was standing in the doorway with a broken rifle in one hand and a Drago limb in the other, and he was laughing. Not a mad laugh. A good laugh. Like he'd finally found the thing he was made for. And Captain Reyes went back for one of my soldiers. A young one barely past training who'd fallen and gotten pinned in the wreckage on deck 2. We'd have left him. I want to be honest with you, I would have left him. The ship was going. The math said leave him. He was 1 soldier and the risk was 7 human lives. Reyes went back anyway. He got the boy free. We heard it over the comm. We heard him talking the whole way, calm, easy, almost there, kid, hang on, hang on. And we heard the boy crying, and we heard the Drago, and then we heard Reyes say the last thing he ever said. He said, "Go on. Run. I'm right behind you." He wasn't right behind him. The boy made it to the tube. Reyes did not. The last thing that came over the comm from the Talon of Vel was the sound of an old human, alone, laughing softly to himself in the dark. And then the boarding tube blew and we pulled away and the ship was gone. We drifted out of the Kesari drift on that ugly little ship, packed so tight there was no room to sit. 240 Velsaran soldiers and 5 humans. The 5 who were left didn't cry the way we thought they would. They got quiet. They took care of the wounded. Amara Akafer sat in the corner with that cloth toy in her hands and turned it over and over, and after a while I understood the toy had belonged to someone. A child. Hers, maybe, back on the death world, waiting for her. I sat down next to her. Me, a Velsaran officer, sitting on the floor of a human ship next to a small soft creature I had wanted to make feel afraid. I didn't have any words, so I just did the human thing. I held out my hand. She looked at it, and she smiled that sad, tired smile, and she took it, and her small, strong human fingers wrapped around mine, and neither of us said anything for a long, long time. They gave Captain Reyes a medal afterward. And Marcus Bell, posthumous, the Conquered called it, big ceremony, speeches. The fleet admiral talked about heroism and sacrifice and the noble spirit of our brave human allies. I stood in the back and I listened, and I wanted to scream. Because they didn't understand. They were still doing it, still calling them charming little survivors, still calling them heroes, like heroes was a word big enough to hold what I had seen. The galaxy spent 40 years thinking Earth had sent us heroes. But I was there. I saw what came out of that death world. I saw what a species becomes when it grows up on a planet that spends 4 billion years trying to kill it and fails. I saw the calm in the corporal's eyes when she cut a pirate in half. I saw a bald man laugh in a doorway made of death. I saw an old man walk back into hell for a boy who wasn't even his, because to him, there was no such thing as a boy who wasn't his. Earth didn't create heroes. Heroes have limits. Heroes know when to stop. Heroes do the brave thing and then they go home. Earth created something the galaxy had no word for. Something that looks soft and smiles with flat white teeth and carries a child's toy on its belt into the mouth of the void, and then does the impossible, casually, gently, like it's the most natural thing in the world. Because to them, it is. The Drago have a name for humans now. It doesn't translate cleanly. The closest my people can render it is the ones who come back. They come back for their wounded. They come back for their dead. They come back for you, even when you didn't take their hand, even when the math says leave you, even when it costs them everything. I've served 30 more cycles since that day. I've seen a lot of the galaxy, and I've never stopped thinking about what Reyes said to me, dying in the dark of my own ship. Somebody's drowning, you pull him out. That's the whole rule. We thought we were the strong ones, the old empires, the great fleets. We measured strength in guns and ships and the fear on other people's faces. The humans measured it in who you die for. And that, in the end, is why the galaxy was never ready for them. Not the strength, not the speed, not the deathworld hands or the horrible calm or the way they move like water through a room full of dying things. It was the fact that they'd do all of it, every impossible, monstrous, beautiful bit of it, for a stranger. We built our whole civilization to be afraid of the wrong thing. I don't have a hand to shake anymore. Lost it 2 cycles back, out past the rim. But when I meet a human now, and I always find them, they're everywhere now, the galaxy is full of their laughing and their fighting and their coming back. I hold out what's left of my arm. And they always take it. Every single time. I told you how it ended. Now let me tell you what came after, because the after is where I really learned who they were. We limped back to conquered space on that ugly little ship. 19 days. 19 days packed so tight that a soldier couldn't stretch his legs without putting them across someone else's chest. 240 of my people. 5 humans. You'd think in that kind of misery that people would turn on each other. That's what my training said. Starve a crew, crowd them, take away their dead and their sleep, and they crack. They fight over water. They fight over space. I'd seen it happen on Velsarin ships in far better conditions than that. It didn't happen, and the reason it didn't happen was the humans. I watched them do it. I didn't understand it at the time, but I watched. There was a soldier of mine, Tavar, young, from the outer ring, who was dying slowly from a Drago wound that had gone bad. The kind of wound where everyone knows and nobody says. Our own medics had done what they could, and it wasn't enough. He had maybe 2 days. He knew it. We all knew it. Corporal Akafer sat with him. Not for a shift, not out of duty. She sat with him the whole time. 19 hours a day, next to a soldier from a species that had spat on her captain's kindness, holding his 3-fingered hand in her 2 soft, small ones, talking to him in a language he didn't understand and understanding, somehow, everything he said back. On the last night, Tavar asked me to come close. His voice was almost gone, and he said to me, "I'll never forget it," he said, "the human she sings, when I can't sleep. She doesn't know the words in my tongue, so she just hums, like my mother did." He died before dawn with her humming next to him. And I sat there in the dark of that ship, and I thought about how, 19 days ago, I would not shake this creature's hand. When we finally reached the conquered way station at Marin's Reach, they treated it like a great victory. That's the part that made me sick. Rescue tugs came out to meet us, medical teams, and reporters. The galaxy loves a story, and conquered soldiers saved by brave human allies was a very good story. They wanted the humans to stand for images. They wanted the survivors to smile and wave. The 5 humans wouldn't do it. Amara Akafer stood at the top of the boarding ramp, filthy, hollow-eyed, with a Drago blade wound in her side that she still hadn't let anyone properly close, and a reporter shoved a recorder at her and asked her how it felt to be a hero. She looked at him for a long moment, and she said very quietly, "We left 2 of ours back there. Don't you dare call me that yet." And she walked past him. The conquered didn't know what to do with that. In our culture, when you win, you accept the honor. That's how it works. You don't refuse the medal. You don't tell the crowd to be quiet. But the humans, they didn't seem to want honor at all. They wanted their dead back, and since they couldn't have that, they wanted to be left alone. I started to understand then that heroism was our word for them, not theirs. We needed them to be heroes so we could file them into a category we understood. They didn't fit the category. They never had. We just kept forcing them into it because the alternative was too frightening. There was a tribunal. I need you to understand how the Concord works because otherwise this next part won't make sense. When a Concord ship is lost, there's an inquiry. Always. Someone has to explain how it happened, who made mistakes, whether anyone acted dishonorably. It's not cruel. It's how we learn. But it's also sometimes how we find someone to blame. And someone in the fleet wanted to blame the humans. The argument went like this. The Margaret Ostrowski broke formation. It abandoned its assigned escort position. It rammed a hostile vessel, an unsanctioned action. By the strict letter of Concord doctrine, the humans had disobeyed a dozen standing orders. And 2 of them had died doing it, and their ship had taken heavy damage, and there were officers in the fleet, high officers, old ones who had never bled, who felt that this reflected badly, that it showed the humans were reckless, undisciplined, dangerous to serve alongside. They wanted it on record that the humans had acted improperly. I was called to give witness, and I stood in that cold, gray tribunal chamber in front of a row of fleet admirals with their smooth, unscarred faces, and one of them, Admiral Sess, a Velserin like me, a great and respected soldier, asked me to confirm that the human vessel had broken formation without authorization. Yes, I said, it did. And in your professional judgment, officer, was this action reckless? I looked at him. This old admiral who had never once been aboard a dying ship with the enemy coming through the walls, who had never watched a bald man laugh in a doorway, who had never heard an old human say, "Go on, run, I'm right behind you," and mean the opposite. And I said, "Sir, may I answer fully?" "You may." So I told them. I told them everything. I told them about Deck 4 and the corporal's calm eyes. I told them about Marcus Bell holding the bulkhead. I told them how Rays went back for a soldier we would have left. I told them that 240 of my people were breathing at that moment, breathing, standing, alive, because 9 humans decided that the rules of formation mattered less than the lives of strangers who had insulted them. And then I said the thing that ended my career, and I have never once regretted it. I said, "Admiral, if discipline means keeping formation while your allies die in front of you, then the humans have no discipline, none at all, and I would give the rest of my life to be as undisciplined as they are." The chamber went very quiet. Admiral Sess looked at me for a long time. He was not a bad man. I want to be fair to him. He was a product of the same world I was, the gentle ring worlds, the careful centuries, the strength measured in fear. And I watched something move behind his eyes, something uncomfortable, something that had been sitting in all of us for 40 years and that none of us had wanted to look at directly. The tribunal cleared the humans, full honors, no reprimand. But I was quietly relieved of my post 6 weeks later. Reassignment, they called it. I understood. I had said out loud the thing the fleet was not ready to hear. I didn't mind. I'd already stopped being the soldier I was before the Kesari drift. That soldier had died on Deck 4. Something else had walked off that ship. I could end the story there. It would be a clean ending. But it wouldn't be the true one, because the true one came 2 years later, and it's the reason I'm telling you any of this at all. I'd taken civilian work by then. Escort contracts mostly. Riding shotgun on trade ships too poor to afford real Concord protection. It's honest work and nobody asks about your past. And that's how I ended up, of all the places in the galaxy, back near the edge of the Kesari drift. Different job, different ship, a little hauler carrying grain to a mining moon. I didn't even want to look at the drift. Bad memories float in that dark. We were 3 days out when the distress call came. It was faint, bounced and broken, the way all signals get near that graveyard, but the ship system pulled it apart and cleaned it up, and when the words came through clear, I felt my whole body go cold. It was a human voice. Any vessel, this is the survey ship Halloran. We are under attack by Drago raiders. We have wounded. We have children aboard, requesting immediate. Children. A human survey crew out mapping the old wreckage, and the Drago had found them, and they had children aboard, human young. On a death world, humans raise their young to survive anything, but a child is a child, and the Drago do not care. My captain, a decent man, a Threll cautious like all his kind, looked at me and said what any sane commander would say. He said, "We can't. We're a grain hauler. We have no weapons. Going in there is suicide. The Conquered will send someone." And he was right. That was the correct call. The math was the math. I stood there on that bridge and I heard the human voice crackling through, begging any vessel to come. And I heard, behind the captain's voice on the recording, the sound of children. And I thought about Rays. Somebody's drowning, you pull him out. That's the whole rule. That's the only rule that ever mattered. I looked at my captain and I said, "Turn the ship around." "I gave an order," he said. "I know," I said. "Turn it around anyway." "I'm not going to tell you I fought like the humans did. I didn't. I couldn't. I'm Velsarin strong, yes, trained, yes, but I don't have the thing they have, the old death world thing, the coming alive thing. I went into that fight afraid, the way my people are built to be afraid. But I went in. For the first time in my life, I broke formation. I disobeyed a lawful order. I took an unarmed grain hauler into the mouth of the Kesari drift because somewhere in that dark, human children were screaming, and I had finally understood that the rules of doctrine are worth less than a single life you could have saved. We found the Halloran pinned against a dead cruiser, 2 Drago boarding pods already latched onto her hull. My captain, who forgave me later, who told me it was the finest thing he'd ever been part of, he flew that grain hauler like a warship. We had no guns, so he used the ship itself. He sheared one of the Drago pods off the *Halloran *S hull by scraping our hull against it. Reckless. Insane. Human, almost. And I did the only thing I know how to do. I put on a suit, and I crossed the gap, and I boarded the Halloran, and I fought the Drago in her corridors the way I'd fought them on the Talon of Vel 2 years before. Except this time, I wasn't fighting to hold a line or die with honor. I was fighting to pull someone out of the water. There were 4 children aboard. And 6 adults, 3 of them already dead. I got the children into the safe room and I stood in the doorway the way Marcus Bell had stood in a doorway, and I held it. I'm not fast like a human. I'm not water. But I am big and I am strong, and I filled that doorway with my body and I did not let them through. I lost my hand that day, right there. A Drago blade took it clean off at the wrist and I didn't even feel it until later. I kept holding the door with the other one. We held long enough. A real Conquered patrol finally came, the distress call had reached them too, and they finished what we'd started. The children lived, all 4 of them. Here's the part I've been trying to get to this whole time. When it was over, when the corridors were quiet and the medics had come, I sat down against the wall of that ship, bleeding from where my hand used to be, and one of the human children came and sat down next to me. A little one, maybe 6 years old in human years, wide dark eyes. She'd watched me hold that door. She'd watched me lose the hand. She looked at the space where my hand should have been. And then she reached into her little jacket and she pulled out a cloth toy, a small stitched animal, worn soft from being held, and she put it in my remaining hand and closed my fingers around it. And I understood. I understood the corporal's toy on the Margaret Ostrowski. I understood why a soldier carries a child's toy into war. It's not sentiment. It's not weakness. It's the whole reason. It's the thing you're fighting for, right there on your belt, so you never forget for 1 second what the fighting is actually for. We Velsarin fought for honor, for the fleet, for the correct execution of doctrine, abstract things, cold things. The humans fought for a face, for a small worn toy, for the specific, particular, irreplaceable life of one drowning stranger at a time. That's the difference. That's the whole thing. That's what 40 years of scientists and reports and tribunals never managed to write down. I held that little cloth animal in my one remaining hand and I cried. A Velsarin boarding officer, crying on the floor of a shot-up survey ship, while a human child patted my arm and told me in her small, brave, Deathworld voice that it was going to be okay. I kept the toy, I still have it. It sits on the shelf in whatever bunk I'm sleeping in wherever the work takes me. The child grew up. Her name is Sarah. She writes to me sometimes. She's a survey pilot now, out mapping the deep dark, doing the dangerous thing her people always do because someone has to and they never, ever wait for someone else to do it. The galaxy has mostly stopped calling humans heroes now. We've run out of room for that word. We've had to make new ones. The Drago call them the ones who come back. My people, the Velsarin, we've started calling them something too, and it doesn't translate cleanly either, but the closest I can give you is the ones who taught us shame, because they showed us what we could have been all along if we'd ever had the courage. The strength was never the frightening part. The frightening part was the love. We were never afraid of their hands. We were afraid of their hearts because their hearts made a mockery of everything we'd told ourselves strength was. I'm old now, old for a Velsarin. One hand, a bad leg, a body full of scars I mostly earned after I met the humans, not before. And when the young soldiers ask me, the ones who never saw the old galaxy, the one that laughed at the junk crate from Earth, when they ask me what humans are really like, underneath the smiling and the flat white teeth, I always tell them the same thing. I tell them, Earth didn't create heroes. Heroes are what you call someone when you want them to stop. Heroes do the brave thing and then they go home, and the story ends and everybody feels good. Earth made something that doesn't stop, something that will cross the gap for a stranger, hold the door with a severed hand, sit for 19 days with a dying enemy, and hum him to sleep like his mother did. Something soft and small and warm that walks into the mouth of the void carrying a child's toy, and does the impossible gently like it's nothing, like it's the only thing worth doing. We spent our whole history building fleets to make other species afraid. And then a gray-haired old man with tired, kind eyes looked up at me and refused to be afraid, and pulled 240 of us out of the dark, and it undid everything. The galaxy was never ready for them. I don't think it ever will be. I hope it never has to be. Because a galaxy that needs humans to come back, for it is a galaxy in a lot of trouble. And a galaxy lucky enough to have them anyway is the luckiest thing I've ever known. I hold out what's left of my arm now to every human I meet. And they always take it. Every single time.